Montana Territory, 1874. The unforgiving winter winds howled across the valley like vengeful spirits, rattling the wooden beams of the Copper Creek Saloon. Inside, Adam Calloway hunched over his whiskey, 25 years of frontier life etched into features too young to bear such weight. His tan Stetson cast shadows across eyes that had witnessed more death than most men twice his age. "Another," he muttered, sliding his empty glass across the worn bar counter. The barkeep raised an eyebrow. "That'll be your fourth, Calloway. Sun ain't even down yet." Adam glared up, his handsome features hardened by the merciless Montana wilderness. His broad shoulders tensed beneath his worn denim jacket, the revolver at his hip a constant companion in a land where trust was a luxury few could afford. "Just pour the drink," Adam said flatly. This was the rhythm of his existence since the Blackfoot raid claimed his parents 3 years prior: work the cattle, drink away the memories, sleep with one eye open. A cowboy's life was solitary by necessity, the frontier forgave no weakness, and attachment only gave death more to take from you. Love was a distraction that got men killed out here. Better to ride alone, trust no one but yourself and your horse. The saloon doors swung open, bringing with them a blast of frigid air, and the town's self-appointed welcoming committee, Sheriff Miller, escorting a newcomer, something rare enough to silence the room. Adam glanced up despite himself. "Folks, this here's Miss Abigail Lawson," the sheriff announced, "come all the way from Boston to take over teachin' duties at our school." Adam's attention caught on the young woman. She couldn't be more than 22, with honey blonde hair swept into a neat chignon beneath her blue bonnet. Her traveling dress, though wrinkled from the journey, was a fine blue wool that spoke of Eastern money. But it was her eyes that held him, deep green and unafraid, as they surveyed the room of rough men and frontier women. "I appreciate the introduction, Sheriff," she said, with a clear, educated voice that carried no tremor despite the stares. "I look forward to serving this community." Adam scoffed quietly, returning to his drink. She'd be gone before the first blizzard. The frontier crushed delicate things from back east with ruthless efficiency. Copper Creek had buried 3 schoolteachers in 5 years, one to pneumonia, one to a Sioux arrow, and one who simply fled back east after witnessing a public hanging. This one, with her fancy dress and soft hands, would follow the same path. He drained his whiskey, slammed a coin on the counter, and strode toward the door. His path took him directly past the schoolteacher and sheriff. "Miss Lawson, this here's Adam Calloway," Sheriff Miller said. "Runs the Circle C ranch south of town, one of our more reliable citizens when he ain't drownin' in whiskey." Adam tipped his hat stiffly, eager to escape. "Ma'am." "Mister." "Calloway," she extended her gloved hand, an Eastern formality that seemed absurdly out of place. "Perhaps you might direct me to families with school-aged children. I aim to begin lessons as soon as possible." "Can't help you there," he replied, ignoring her outstretched hand. "I don't keep track of other folks' business. Survival out here takes all the attention I've got." Something flashed in her eyes, not hurt but determination. "Then I won't take more of your time, Mr. Calloway. Though it seems to me that survival without community is merely existing." The words followed Adam out into the biting cold, unwelcome as they settled in his mind. He mounted his palomino and spurred it toward home, pushing away thoughts of green eyes and challenge-filled words. The Montana wilderness had no place for schoolteachers with fancy ideas about community. Out here, a man survived by keeping his guard up and his heart locked away. 3 weeks later, Adam found himself riding into town for supplies earlier than planned. His foreman, Martin, had broken his arm during a failed attempt to rescue a calf from a ravine. The ranch's medical supplies needed replenishing, and with winter settling in, Adam couldn't afford to wait. As he tied his horse outside the general store, he noticed a small crowd gathered at the schoolhouse. Curiosity, a dangerous trait on the frontier, pulled him toward the commotion. Through the gathering of townsfolk, he spotted Miss Lawson standing on the schoolhouse steps, her honey-blonde hair coming loose from its pins as she gestured animatedly. "The school needs proper insulation before deep winter sets in," she was saying, her breath visible in the cold air. "The children cannot learn when they're shivering." Old man Jenkins, who owned the lumber mill, shook his head. "Ain't got men to spare for such work, miss. Everyone's battening down their own places." "Then I'll do it myself," she declared, straightening her spine. Today she wore a practical brown dress with a heavy shawl, looking less Eastern than when Adam had first seen her. "I simply need the materials and instruction." Laughter rippled through the crowd. "You ever handled a hammer, Miss Lawson?" someone called out. "I have not," she admitted without shame. "But I am capable of learning. My students deserve a warm classroom." Adam found himself stepping forward before he could think better of it. "You'll freeze to death before you finish." Green eyes found his recognition flashing. "Mr. Calloway, do you have a better suggestion or merely more discouragement to offer?" The challenge in her voice pricked at something long dormant in him. He remembered his father's words about a Calloway never backing down from what needed doing. "I've got 2 days before I need to move the herd to winter pasture," he said, immediately regretting the words even as they left his mouth. "I can help with the insulation." Surprise rippled across her face, quickly replaced by a smile that hit Adam with unexpected force. "That would be most welcome, Mr. Calloway." And that was how Adam found himself spending the next morning nailing batting between wall studs in the drafty schoolhouse, while Abigail Lawson read aloud from The Count of Monte Cristo to keep them both entertained. Her voice carried the story with such animation that he found himself pausing to listen more than once. "You read well," he commented during a break, accepting the tin cup of coffee she offered. "Literature was my passion before teaching became my calling," she replied, settling onto a child-sized bench with her own cup. "Books can transport us beyond our circumstances, even in the harshest environments." Adam studied her, the determined set of her jaw, the intelligence in her eyes. Why come all this way to teach frontier children? Surely Boston had safer positions. Something shadowed her expression. "I needed a fresh start, and I believe education matters most where it's hardest to come by." "The frontier breaks most who come seeking fresh starts," he warned, the words emerging more gently than he intended. "Then they weren't determined enough," she met his gaze steadily. "The human spirit can withstand far more than we give it credit for, Mr. Calloway." "Adam," he corrected, surprising himself. "If we're going to finish this insulation before sundown, you might as well use my given name." Her smile returned, warming the frigid schoolroom more effectively than any insulation. "Abigail, then." They worked side by side through the afternoon, and Adam found himself speaking more than he had in months. He told her about the Circle C Ranch, about the cattle drive planned for spring, about the challenges of Montana winters. She listened intently, asking questions that revealed both her Eastern ignorance and her quick intelligence. As dusk approached, Sheriff Miller burst through the schoolhouse door, his expression grim. "Adam, we need you." Young Timmy Carson wandered off from his pa's homestead. Been gone 3 hours now, snow's coming in fast. Adam was on his feet immediately, reaching for his coat. 3 hours missing with a storm approaching was a death sentence for a child on the Montana frontier. "I'll gather men from the saloon," the sheriff continued. "We're forming search parties." "I'm coming too," Abigail said, already donning her heavy wool cloak. Both men stared at her. "This ain't women's business, Miss Lawson," the sheriff said gruffly. "That boy's likely halfway to frozen already, no place for a lady." Adam expected her to back down. Instead, she wrapped a woolen scarf around her neck with practiced efficiency. "Timmy is my student. I know which places near the creek fascinate him most. He's written about them in his composition books. And I grew up navigating Boston winters. I won't slow you down." The sheriff looked to Adam, who found himself nodding despite his better judgment. "We need every advantage with night coming on. Let's go." Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying the first flakes of what promised to be a substantial snowfall. They mounted quickly, the sheriff providing a sturdy mare for Abigail, and rode toward the Carson homestead where other searchers were gathering. Adam watched Abigail from the corner of his eye as they rode, expecting to see fear or regret on her face. Instead, he saw only focused determination as she kept pace with them, handling her horse with unexpected skill. At the Carson place, Mrs. Carson sobbed while clutching her younger children. "He was just playing with the dog, then both were gone," she explained through tears. "He knows not to wander, but that fool dog." "The creek," Abigail said suddenly. In his stories, Timmy writes about a special cave near the bend in the creek where he pretends to be a mountain man. He says his dog always leads him there. Mr. Carson looked up sharply. "There's a small overhang about half a mile downstream. Not really a cave, but a boy might see it that way." The search parties divided up the territory. Adam found himself paired with Abigail, heading toward the creek while others took different directions. The snow was falling heavily now, reducing visibility and covering any tracks Timmy might have left. "Stay close," Adam warned as they dismounted to search along the creek. "This storm turns deadly fast." Abigail nodded, her face serious. "Timmy," she called out, her voice carrying across the darkening landscape. "Timmy Carson." They moved methodically along the frozen creek, the wind cutting through their clothing despite layers of wool. Adam watched Abigail for signs of weakening, but she pushed forward with the same determination she'd shown at the schoolhouse. An hour into the search, with darkness nearly complete and the storm intensifying, Adam was about to suggest they return to regroup when a distant bark echoed through the swirling snow. There, Abigail pointed, already moving toward the sound. They scrambled down the slick creek bank, calling Timmy's name. The dog barked again, closer now, and suddenly emerged from the white curtain of snow, tail wagging frantically. "Take us to Timmy, boy," Adam urged, and the dog turned, leading them along the creek until the vague outline of an overhanging rock formation appeared through the storm. There, huddled in the meager shelter, they found the boy, shivering violently, his lips blue with cold but alive. "Miss Lawson," the child whispered through chattering teeth as Abigail reached him first. "I got lost." "You're found now," she said firmly, already removing her cloak to wrap around him. "And you're going to be just fine." Adam watched in amazement as she worked with practiced efficiency, rubbing the boy's hands and feet as she instructed Adam to fire a signal shot for the other searchers. When Adam hesitated to use their only dry gunpowder in the increasing snow, she fixed him with a steady gaze. "Trust me, I know cold. Fire the shot, then we must get him moving." He obeyed, then helped her get the barely conscious child to his feet. They half-carried, half-dragged Timmy between them back to the horses, the loyal dog leading the way. By the time the other searchers converged on them, Abigail had Timmy secured on her horse, her body sheltering his from the wind as she kept him talking to prevent him from falling asleep. "You're a marvel," Adam said quietly as they rode back to the Carson homestead, the crisis averted. Most Easterners would have panicked. The storm had plastered tendrils of honey-blonde hair to her face, but her eyes remained clear and focused. "The frontier doesn't hold a monopoly on courage, Adam. It merely provides more opportunities to display it." Something shifted in Adam's chest, a crack in foundations he had believed solid. This woman, with her books and Eastern education, had shown more courage in one night than many frontier-hardened men he'd known. It contradicted everything he believed about survival out west. The Carson family's gratitude was overwhelming. As the mother embraced Abigail, sobbing thanks, Adam found himself watching the schoolteacher with new eyes. She had risked her life for a student without hesitation, diving into a blizzard with the same determination she'd shown insulating the schoolhouse. The town celebrated their miracle rescue as the blizzard raged for 3 days, trapping most residents in their homes. Adam found himself snowbound in town, taking a room at the boarding house rather than risking the ride back to his ranch. On the third evening, as the storm finally began to wane, he encountered Abigail in the boarding house parlor, reading by lamplight. "How's Timmy?" he asked, taking a seat across from her. She looked up with a smile that seemed to brighten the dim room. "Recovering well, no frostbite, thankfully. His mother says he's already asking when he can return to school." "You saved his life." "We saved his life," she corrected gently. "I couldn't have done it alone." Silence stretched between them, comfortable rather than awkward. Adam studied the woman before him, trying to reconcile her with his beliefs about Eastern softness. "Why did you really leave Boston, Abigail?" he asked finally. She closed her book, running her fingers along its leather binding. "My fiancé died in the war, Gettysburg. Afterward, Boston felt suffocating. Everyone watching the grieving widow, who never was, offering pity but expecting me to eventually marry another suitable gentleman." Her green eyes met his. "I wanted purpose, not pity." "Teaching out west offered both." "The war took much from many," Adam said quietly, thinking of his own brother lost at Antietam. "It did, but loss can either destroy us or transform us." She leaned forward. "What about you, Adam? What keeps you so determined to face the frontier alone?" The question struck too close to truths he rarely acknowledged. He almost rose to leave, but something in her gaze held him there. "My parents were killed in a raid 3 years ago," he said finally. "I was in town when it happened. By the time I got back," he swallowed hard, "the frontier takes everything eventually. Caring just makes the loss harder when it comes." "And yet you risked yourself for a child you barely knew," she observed. "You helped insulate a schoolhouse for children not your own." Adam had no ready answer for this contradiction. He changed the subject instead, asking about her teaching methods, and they talked long into the night about books and ideas and the future of the Montana Territory. When the snow cleared enough for travel, Adam reluctantly prepared to return to his ranch. He found Abigail at the schoolhouse, already rearranging desks for the students' return. "I came to say goodbye," he said from the doorway. "Need to check on my herd after the storm." She straightened, wiping dust from her hands. "Will you come to our Christmas pageant next month? The children are preparing recitations." "I don't usually come to town events," he hedged. "Perhaps it's time to change usual patterns," she suggested with a small smile. "The frontier doesn't have to mean isolation, Adam." He left without promising, but her words followed him home, echoing through his mind as he assessed storm damage and counted cattle. His ranch hands noticed the change in him, the thoughtful silences, the decreased whiskey consumption, the occasional questions about the town school. 2 weeks later, Adam found himself riding back into Copper Creek with a load of venison, for winter provisions, he told himself, though the rabbits and deer near his property were plentiful. He left half the meat with his sister-in-law, Sarah, his brother's widow, and found himself directing his horse toward the schoolhouse with the remainder. Through the window, he could see Abigail instructing a room full of attentive children, her animated expressions bringing life to whatever lesson she taught. He watched for several minutes before dismounting, oddly reluctant to interrupt. When school dismissed, the children burst from the building with the boundless energy of youth, several calling greetings to Mr. Calloway as they recognized him. Timmy Carson paused to thank him again for the rescue, his small face earnest beneath his woolen cap. Abigail appeared in the doorway, surprise and pleasure crossing her face. "Adam. What brings you to town?" He gestured awkwardly to the venison, thought the boarding house might be running low on meat after the storm. Her smile suggested she saw through his excuse, but she accepted it graciously. "Very thoughtful, Mrs. Peterson will be delighted." They fell into step together, leading his horse toward the boarding house. Adam found himself noticing things he'd overlooked before, the way she greeted every person they passed by name, how she asked specific questions about their families, the respect with which even the roughest miners treated her. "You've made quite an impression on this town," he observed. "Communities are built through intention, not accident," she replied. "Every person matters in the building." "Even solitary ranchers?" he asked with a half-smile. "Especially those," she said, her gaze warm upon his face. "The strongest communities need those who understand self-reliance but choose connection anyway." The words stirred something in Adam, a longing he'd buried beneath grief and whiskey and the endless work of survival. What would it mean to choose connection over isolation, to build rather than merely exist? Their paths crossed with increasing frequency over the next month. Adam found reasons to visit town, supplies needed, letters to mail, fences requiring specific hardware from the general store. Each visit somehow included time with Abigail, helping carry books, fixing a broken school bench, discussing a student's progress, sharing coffee at the boarding house. December arrived with bitter cold but little snow. The Christmas pageant approached, and Adam surprised himself by mentally noting the date. He hadn't celebrated Christmas since his parents' death, but the thought of Abigail's disappointed face if he failed to appear was somehow worse than facing the holiday memories. 2 days before the pageant, Adam rode into town for mail, only to find the community in an uproar. A band of outlaws had robbed the stage 10 miles north, stealing the payroll intended for the mining company. Worse, they'd taken a hostage, the banker's 16-year-old son, who'd been traveling home from school back east. Sheriff Miller was organizing a posse when Adam arrived at the sheriff's office. "They're headed for the high country," the lawman explained grimly. "4 men, well armed. They've sent ransom demands, want $5,000 by tomorrow noon or they'll kill the boy." "The mining company doesn't have that kind of cash on hand," said Jenkins, the mill owner. "Not after the robbery." "Then we go after them," Adam said, removing his coat and checking his revolver. The thought of a boy held by desperate men in the freezing mountains left no other option. "How many riders can we muster?" "8 counting you," the sheriff said. "These aren't ordinary bandits, Calloway. Their leader is Jake Hollister, wanted in 3 territories. They won't hesitate to kill." Adam nodded grimly. "Neither will we if it comes to saving the boy." The door opened, bringing a blast of cold air and Abigail Lawson. She took in the gathered men with one swift glance. "I heard about Thomas." "How can I help?" "By staying here, Miss Lawson," the sheriff said firmly. "This ain't." "If you say women's business one more time, Sheriff, I shall scream," she interrupted with uncharacteristic sharpness. "Thomas Whitfield is my student too, just like Timmy was. I'm not suggesting I join your posse, but surely there must be something useful I can do." Adam found himself smiling despite the grim circumstances. The boy's mother will need support, and someone should prepare medical supplies. We may bring him back injured. Abigail nodded briskly. I'll see to both. When do you ride out? Within the hour, the sheriff answered. These mountains will be death traps after dark. As the men prepared, Adam found a moment alone with Abigail outside the general store where she was gathering medical supplies. Be careful, she said quietly, her green eyes filled with concern. Jake Hollister is known for cruelty. You've heard of him. I read the newspaper reports. He left 3 lawmen dead in Wyoming last year. She placed a hand on his arm, its warmth penetrating his coat sleeve. Promise me you won't take unnecessary risks, Adam. The touch and the concern in her voice stirred something profound in his chest. I promise to return, he said simply. Her smile was tremulous. See that you do. You have a Christmas pageant to attend. The posse rode out as the winter sun hung low in the western sky. They followed the outlaw's trail into the foothills, where pine forests offered both concealment and danger. Adam, an experienced tracker from years of finding stray cattle, took the lead alongside the sheriff. Night fell before they reached the outlaw's camp, forcing them to bivouac in a sheltered ravine. The temperature dropped mercilessly, and the men huddled around small fires, speaking in whispers about strategy for morning. Hollister will expect a frontal assault, Sheriff Miller said as he and Adam studied a rough map by firelight. He'll have the high ground, the boy as shield. Adam traced a route with his finger. What about coming in from above? There's a ridge that might give us the advantage. The sheriff nodded slowly. Dangerous climb in winter, but it might work. We'll need to split the posse, some to create a distraction, others to flank them. Adam volunteered to lead the flanking party, selecting 3 men with steady nerves and good aim. As he rolled into his blankets that night, sleep eluded him. His thoughts turned not to the danger ahead but to Abigail waiting in town, her hand on his arm, her voice extracting a promise of return. For the first time in years he had someone specific to return to, and the realization was both comforting and terrifying. Dawn broke clear and brutally cold. The posse moved out silently, separating at the base of a rocky incline. Adam led his men on a grueling climb up ice-slicked rock faces and through dense pine. By mid-morning, they had positioned themselves on the ridge overlooking a small plateau where smoke from a campfire revealed the outlaw's location. Through his field glasses, Adam could make out 4 men and the boy, Thomas, his hands bound and face bruised. Anger surged through him at the sight of the teenager's condition. He signaled to his men to spread out along the ridge, rifles ready. Below, right on schedule, Sheriff Miller and his group appeared at the mouth of the plateau, demanding the outlaw's surrender. Hollister's response was predictable. He dragged Thomas in front of him as a shield and demanded his ransom. Now, Adam whispered to his men. 4 rifles cracked from the ridge. 2 outlaws fell immediately. Hollister, momentarily distracted, loosened his grip on Thomas, who showed unexpected courage by driving his elbow into his captor's ribs and diving for cover. The 4th outlaw turned his gun toward the prone teenager. Without hesitation, Adam stood from cover and fired, drawing the man's attention away from Thomas. The outlaw's return shot caught Adam high in the left shoulder, spinning him backward on the narrow ridge. He teetered on the edge, pain blinding him momentarily. Below, more gunfire erupted as the sheriff's group charged forward. Adam regained his balance just in time to see Hollister taking aim at the sheriff's back. Despite the fire in his shoulder, Adam raised his revolver and fired once more. Hollister fell and the plateau went suddenly silent. The victory was complete but not without cost. Besides Adam's shoulder wound, 1 posse member had taken a bullet to the leg. Thomas, despite bruises and exposure, was otherwise unharmed and tearfully grateful to his rescuers. The return journey to Copper Creek was slow and painful. Adam's wound, while not life-threatening, bled persistently, and fever set in as they descended from the mountains. By the time the church bells announced their return to town just after dusk, he was barely conscious in the saddle. His memories of arrival were fragmented, Abigail's face, white with concern, being helped into the doctor's house. Searing pain as the bullet was extracted, cool hands on his forehead, soft voice reading something soothing. He awoke the next morning to find himself in a clean bed, his shoulder bandaged and the fever broken. Sunlight streamed through unfamiliar curtains, and as his vision cleared, he discovered Abigail asleep in a chair beside the bed, a book open in her lap. As if sensing his gaze, she stirred, blinking awake. Relief flooded her face when she saw him conscious. You kept your promise, she said softly, leaning forward to place a cool hand against his forehead, though you gave us quite a scare. Thomas, Adam asked, his voice raspy. Safe with his parents, telling the tale of his rescue to anyone who will listen. She poured water from a pitcher and helped him drink. You're quite the hero in his accounting. Adam shook his head weakly. Just did what needed doing. That's what heroes often say, she replied with a small smile. The doctor says you'll recover fully, but you need rest. The bullet missed anything vital. What day is it? He asked suddenly. Christmas Eve morning. The pageant is tonight. She hesitated. I should let you rest. He caught her hand before she could rise. Stay, please, read to me. Something softened in her expression. She settled back into her chair and opened her book, A Christmas Carol, he noted with wry amusement. Really, he asked, her lips quirked. Seemed appropriate. You have rather a lot in common with Mr. Scrooge, after all. I am not a miser, he protested. No, but you've been hoarding yourself away, denying connections that might bring joy. She met his gaze steadily. Until recently. The truth of her words struck him with more force than Hollister's bullet. He had been hiding, not just surviving, using the frontier's harshness as an excuse to avoid the risk of caring again. Perhaps I've had cause to reconsider, he said quietly. Her smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. I'm glad to hear it. Now rest, and perhaps you'll be well enough to attend the pageant after all. The doctor declared him stable, but ordered him to remain in bed another day. Adam chafed at the confinement but complied, especially when Abigail visited between her preparations for the pageant. She brought food, books, and news of the town's celebration of the outlaw's defeat. As evening approached, Adam grew restless. The sounds of townsfolk gathering at the church drifted through his window. Making a decision, he carefully rose and dressed, moving slowly to avoid reopening his wound. The doctor had left a sling, which he awkwardly arranged before donning his coat. The church blazed with candlelight when he arrived, slipping quietly into a back pew as children performed their recitations. He spotted Thomas Whitfield among them, the boy's ordeal apparently forgotten in the excitement of performance. Abigail moved among the children, offering encouragement and prompting forgotten lines, her face radiant with pride. When she glanced toward the back and saw Adam, her expression of surprise and delight made the pain in his shoulder insignificant. After the final carol, as families mingled and shared Christmas wishes, she made her way to his side. You should be resting, she admonished, but her eyes betrayed her pleasure. I made a promise to attend, he replied simply. Outside, snow had begun falling softly, transforming Copper Creek into a Christmas vision. Adam and Abigail walked slowly toward the doctor's house where he was staying, their breath visible in the cold night air. The children were wonderful, Adam said. You've accomplished much in a few months. Children thrive when given attention and structure, she replied. Not unlike communities themselves. They paused beneath the overhang of the general store, watching the snow accumulate on the boardwalk. Adam turned to face her, suddenly aware that his life had irrevocably changed since that first meeting in the saloon. You were right, he said quietly, about courage, about community, about me. Her green eyes reflected the distant church lights. How so? I thought courage meant facing the frontier alone, surviving despite everything it takes from us. But that's not courage, it's fear disguised as strength. He stepped closer. Real courage is risking your heart when you know how much loss hurts. It's helping a schoolteacher insulate a classroom, or searching for a lost child in a blizzard, or teaching frontier children to read when easier positions existed back east. Understanding dawned in her expression. Adam, you showed me what true courage looks like, Abigail, he continued, needing to finish. Not just during the rescue or the manhunt, but every day, choosing connection instead of isolation, building instead of merely surviving. Snow fell around them, creating a private world of white. Adam reached for her hand with his good arm. I don't want to just exist anymore, he said. I want to build something with you if you'll have me. Abigail's smile trembled at the edges. Are you certain? The frontier is harsh on families. It's harsher on those who face it alone, he replied, and I've never been more certain of anything. When he kissed her, the last walls around his heart crumbled completely. Her arms encircled him carefully, mindful of his injury but drawing him closer nonetheless. Yes, she whispered against his lips when they finally parted, I will build with you, Adam Calloway. Spring arrived in Montana territory with its characteristic unpredictability, snow one day, wildflowers the next. The Circle C Ranch had weathered the winter well under Adam's rejuvenated leadership. The cattle drive to summer pasture was completed earlier than usual, allowing time for other, more personal preparations. Copper Creek's small church overflowed on the first truly warm Saturday in May. Adam stood at the altar in a new suit, his shoulder healed and his face tanned from days working alongside his men. When Abigail appeared in the doorway, sunlight streaming behind her and wildflowers in her hands, the gathered townsfolk murmured appreciatively. Her wedding dress, sewn by the women of Copper Creek, featured delicate embroidery around the collar and cuffs, tiny books and cattle brands intermingled in a pattern as unique as their union. Her honey-blonde hair was arranged with similar wildflowers, and her smile outshone the spring sun. Sheriff Miller escorted her down the aisle, having appointed himself surrogate father for the ceremony. Thomas Whitfield and Timmy Carson stood proudly as attendants, representing the bridge between Abigail's world and Adam's. The vows they exchanged spoke not just of love but of partnership, of building something lasting on the frontier, a home, a family, a legacy of connection rather than isolation. At the reception, held in the newly expanded schoolhouse, Sarah approached the couple with tears in her eyes. "My brother would be so proud to see you happy again," she told Adam, embracing him. "And he would have loved Abigail." "We're keeping his old cabin on the north pasture," Adam replied, "for when you and the children visit this summer." The celebration continued into evening, with fiddle music and dancing, stories and laughter. As dusk approached, Adam and Abigail slipped away to the waiting wagon that would take them to the Circle C to home. The ranch house had undergone transformation over the winter months. New bookshelves lined the main room, filled with volumes from Abigail's collection and new acquisitions from Denver. A second bedroom had been added for future hopes, and the porch expanded to catch evening breezes. As Adam lifted his bride across the threshold, the weight of loneliness that had burdened him for years was entirely absent. In its place was something he had never expected to find on the harsh Montana frontier. Joy unmixed and unguarded. Later, as they sat on their porch watching stars emerge above the distant mountains, Abigail rested her head against his shoulder. "Do you know what one of my students wrote in his composition yesterday?" she asked. "What's that?" Adam wrapped his arm around her. "He wrote that Mr. and Mrs. Calloway proved that even in the wild places, love makes us stronger, not weaker." She looked up at him. "Rather profound for a 10-year-old, don't you think?" Adam smiled, remembering the man he had been less than a year ago, drinking alone, convinced that the frontier left no room for love. "I think that boy might be the wisest person in Copper Creek." The Montana night enfolded them, still wild and unpredictable, still demanding respect and caution. But Adam no longer faced it as an adversary to be endured alone. Instead, it formed the backdrop for something he had stopped believing possible, a future built on connection rather than isolation, on courage that came from loving rather than from fear of loss. As Abigail's hand found his in the gathering darkness, Adam Calloway understood at last that survival alone was never enough. It was in building together, a marriage, a community, a life, that one truly conquered the frontier.